When a career is misaligned with your values in any way, that starts to drain at your energy. Medicine is a really stressful career path.
She decided in the middle of her pinnacle achievement to drop out of OBGYN residency.
So I had this idea that I wanted to start my own online business. I didn't want to practice medicine anymore and had this crazy idea that I wanted to be a travel blogger. And I got a job teaching English. I was basically making the same salary that I made in residency.
What if you could reclaim hours of free time each week, create legacy building wealth, and devote more energy to your passion projects without giving up on your career as a life-saving MD? Dr. Vikram Raya is a functional cardiologist, high-performance coach, and real estate expert, is here to give you the tools, strategies, and solutions you need to transform your life, unlock your limitless potential, and achieve greatness, all while freeing up your precious time. Welcome to Limitless MD. Let's dive in.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Limitless MD. I'm your host, Vikram Ryan. Today, we have a super special guest. She's a digital nomad, world traveler. She has helped physicians, nurse practitioners, extended providers all over the country and the world, perhaps, really achieve their best life. Her name is Chelsea Turgeon. Welcome, Chelsea, to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, guys, this when I was doing the research for this episode, I was really perplexed. I was like, wait a minute. One of the hardest things to do is to get into medical school. The second hardest thing to do is to get into a residency or a fellowship. You're about to go and make bank, as a physician, if you will, and live that dream that your parents had always wished for you, and then perhaps you wish for yourself. And she made a bold decision, an interesting decision. And what is that decision? She decided in the middle of, what would have been her pinnacle achievement to drop out of OBGYN residency. And that led and unfolded a series of events that led us to where we are now. Let's call it 5-6 years later, where she is actually living her best life, not the life that was told to her, but the one that she forged and created for herself based on passion, love, interest, and service of others. So Chelsea, help me understand all this.
What a fun intro. Thanks for building all that hype around it.
Yeah.
So let's go back to October of 2018, because that's really like the height of what was happening. So I was 26 years old at that point in my second year of OBGYN residency. And it was during that time that I basically hit this rock bottom of burnout. And so there was this physical component of like, I could barely drag myself out of bed. I was on my gyn-onc rotation at the time, and I would literally sneak away when I was supposed to be at attending's clinic, and I would sneak away and take a nap when nobody was looking. And so I was really at this point where I just couldn't do it anymore physically. And when I look back now, I see that burnout kind of had two parts to it. One is just like the physical sleep deprivation, the exhaustion. Like residency is hard. Nobody paints a picture that it's easy. So like there was that part that I knew to expect, but then the other part that was really a lot harder to deal with was this sort of like expectation hangover, where, like you said, I'm at the pinnacle of my achievement. I graduated top of my class in med school. I interviewed at Harvard and Yale for residency. I went to the number 3 hospital in the world now, in the United States for my specialty. And so I'm here like checking all the boxes. And it's like when you get to that place where you have achieved everything, then that's when you can realize like, oh, that's not it. Because on the outside, everything looked wonderful and looked great. But on the inside, I felt really empty. I felt like really disconnected. I felt bitter, resentful, lonely. It just, like on the inside, it didn't feel right. And it was kind of at this rock bottom that I had this wake up moment of like, okay, this whole time I've been valuing other people's opinions of me, other people's expectations, validation and approval from other people more than I've been prioritizing and valuing my own joy and sense of peace and fulfillment and just my own sense of what I want my life to look like. And so it was sort of in that moment. It took a couple of weeks. I ended up taking a leave of absence. I can talk more about that if you want. But by the end of the leave of absence, I decided I didn't want to practice medicine anymore and had this crazy idea that I wanted to be a travel blogger. And so I literally bought a one-way ticket to South Korea and I got a job teaching English. Obviously, I like turned in my resignation, and it was so interesting because like 1 week I was in the hospital working as a doctor, and the next week I was in a classroom in South Korea teaching third graders English.
Wow. Wow. There's a lot to unpack there, you know? So burnout is important. It's not a common thing we talk about on the Limitless MD podcast, just because the people here, you know, may have experienced something like that, but then they've found a vehicle like you have of what's next. But I for those of you who have periods of this and maybe want to have a framework of how to deal with this, tell me sort of the top big five, you know, like, you know, I've done a safari out in Kruger National Park in South Africa, and, you know, you hunt the big five, right? Like, and when I mean hunt, I'm like, you take your your picture out, your
camera,
Nikon, Canon, Zoom, super, you know, fancy one, and you're like trying to snap all these amazing pictures, right? So what are the big five for burnout for physicians? And it could be physical, it could be mental, but what are the most common things you're sensing or feeling that you felt, or now that you're coaching all these people, what are you getting?
Yeah. So I don't know if I have five, but I'll just go with the ones I know and we'll see where we get to. But okay, number one is values misalignment. So when a career is misaligned with your values in any way, that starts to drain at your energy, because you have to think about burnout as like energy leaking more than it's being replenished. And so you really want to just look at where your energy is going, and your values are where you want to spend your time and energy. That's like what's most important to you. We don't have infinite time and energy in this life, so we have to pick and choose. When you're spending the majority of your waking hours in a job that's not aligned with your values, it feels off. It just doesn't feel right, and it starts to drain at your energy. Another one is when you're in a career that's misaligned with your strengths. That's another big one. And so maybe on an idealistic level, it's aligned with your strength, right? Like if you're playing Dr. House and you're diagnosing people in this like really intellectual way, that's your strength. But maybe all of the day-to-day reality of the work is you're not actually using your strengths on a day-to-day basis. And so that's another thing that can happen. Yeah. So when I was in medicine, I felt like one of my bigger strengths is connecting with patients emotionally, right? How much time do you actually get to spend doing that? Right.
So
like
limited,
more.
Right?
Yeah. And so then it just feels like you're continually being taken away from the thing you want to be doing, and the thing that you're good at, and the thing that like is really interesting to you. Like I was interested in like motivational interviewing to figure out how to get people to stop smoking, and how can I ask a question in a way that gets the answer I want instead of this dialogue of other nonsense that is not relevant. And so those were the pieces that were interesting to me. I spent like 6 minutes per patient and cat. Like it wasn't adding up to a fulfilling day. And so when you're spending your day misaligned with your strengths, misaligned with your values, that starts to drain at you. There's also a lot of nervous system things that can happen. So, I mean, medicine is a really stressful, like high stress, high responsibility career path. There's so many things that are triggering your nervous system at all times. You're really in a sympathetic state, like whether it's not everyone's an OB, like running to condition O's all the time, but I still have like flashbacks from anytime there's like a beeping sound, I'm like, oh, condition O. So like anyone, anywhere in the hospital, their nervous system is on high alert. We're not given time and space to, or the tools to learn how to process, how to downregulate, how to come out of that sympathetic to go into parasympathetic. And so being in a chronic state of sympathetic activation, your body processes that the same way as it processes trauma. And so that's a huge energy drain that starts to create burnout too. So I would say those are my top three. So we didn't see the rhino and we didn't see the cheetah, but those are the top three.
Yeah. And then I'm sure the other two are really like, you know, where these emotional things start harboring on the physical, right? You said, I physically can't do this. I can't do this anymore. Like it got to the point where your muscles would not move. Like a lot of us can deal with all this and we just suck it up and unfortunately, you know, do this for many years thinking either there's no other option or it's too much work to switch or whatever the reasons are. But you were like, your body was just froze. And so how does one understand sort of the physical manifestations of some of this? Like what is it? Sleeplessness? Is it irritability? Is it snapping at their children or their spouse, or is it, like they're, even though they hit the paycheck goal or the income goal, they're still not fulfilled? Like what, can you unpack some of that?
Yeah, yeah. So it's like some of the physical and emotional, they kind of merge together because I experience my emotions so physically. And so I
Yeah.
think of them as together. So when I think of sort of the fatigue and just the pure energy piece of burnout, it's like you wake up and maybe you even slept 8 hours, but you're still exhausted.
Mm.
Like your alarm goes off and you're just like, what? Like it doesn't feel like there's any amount of sleep that can
Yeah,
actually recharge you.
right.
So that was something I noticed, just like chronic fatigue despite resting. And then there's just kind of being in this zombie state. Like I
Yes.
would get home from
I
work
think
and
that's
I
a
would
that's
just
a
kind of,
very good word, zombie state.
yeah,
Even if you're actually enjoying what you do, but there's periods of time where intense stress, intense productivity that has to come out of you. You just sort of like, you haven't really processed, you haven't disconnected, detached, and you're really just more like a machine versus a human being.
yeah. And it's like you're kind of just dragging a body around and it's like, what's actually happening here? But just like
Cool.
plopping on the couch and feeling like, nope,
Okay,
not going to get
so
up for the
you
5 hours.
you decided to do the teaching in Korea, and then tell me about, like, how did you deal with all the expectations that were broken from everyone around you, number one, and what did you think you're going to do with the rest of your life?
Yeah. Okay. So dealing with the expectations that were broken was, I don't want to say easy, but it was sort of just, I had to do it because I hit this point where I was like, I've met everyone's expectations. Like if I took a poll right now, my approval rate would be 100%. Everyone would say, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And I feel horrible. So like, I can't care about this as much as I need to care about what I want. So it was just this sort of necessity of I got to put those on the back burner and I have to just focus on myself at the time. So that was dealing with other people's expectations. As far as what I thought the rest of my life was going to look like, I had this idea that basically I wanted to be doing what I'm doing now. So I had this idea that I wanted to start my own online business and I wanted to be writing. So I thought that was going to be travel blogging initially. I wanted to go back to my original love of psychology. So I majored in psychology in undergrad, but just kind of ended up going to med school thinking I would do psychiatry. Did not like how psychiatry was practiced. And so didn't end up doing that. But I had this initial love of personal growth and mental health and like I said, talking with people, the motivational interviewing, that kind of thing. So I really did love psychology. And I sort of found out that coaching was a field that I could go into without having to go back to school, take on a bunch of additional loans and kind of go down a more traditional route. So I found out about coaching. And so I signed up for a coaching certification. I started a blog, and teaching was always meant to be a bridge job for me. And so when I say bridge job, it was a way for me to financially support myself while I was working on the bigger stuff that I actually wanted to do, the things that were part of my purpose and my passion and all of that. So I got the job teaching English, knowing full well like this is sort of a means
Sure.
to an end in a
Sure.
sense. And it was supporting me. I was basically making the same salary that I made in residency, but I was working half the time. And so
Right.
I felt like I had a part-time job, had plenty of time on the side to do what I wanted to do, was also in a foreign place and I got to explore and like live and travel, had all my weekends off, which was incredible. And so, yeah, it was just during that year I started learning everything about online business, getting my coaching certification, developing those skills, and
Mhm.
just kind of in the trenches of building my next thing.
That's awesome. So I want you guys to pay attention to how she constructed this. Well, first, she realized her values were misaligned. She realized that this was a draining activity versus a fulfilling activity. Her nervous system didn't like it, and she couldn't imagine doing this for, let alone a decade at a time versus even an additional few months or a year. So she had to find alternative. And so there's several ways. If you're not this extreme in your, visceral adaptation to whatever career you are, whether it is, then what you could do is what she already did, which is on the side, start planning either a pivot, an exit, or an addition where you scale back in medicine and you get to do a passion project, passion job, passion business, or and you can date it and test drive it and let's see how it feels and marinate in it. And if you really love it, then you can even pivot. And I've done that. A lot of other physicians we know have done that, where they've done the full pivot. But otherwise, it could be a complement. And there are it's shades of gray here. There's not black and white solutions, and really knowing that it's your life, it's your destiny, it's what you choose to make of it. And so I think that's very powerful. And she was already looking at her skill sets like psychology, interests, motivational interviewing, personal growth, self-development. She's been through something that was traumatic. She assumes other people probably have been through something similar. She can have introspection and insight, deeper insight than most, right? And so then she didn't abandon her physicianhood. She just used it in a different way. So I really like that. I wanted to highlight that. I thought it was really cool. So let's talk about some of your hardest. You run a coaching business, and you said you help physicians and NPs and PAs. What are some of the biggest challenges that you help them overcome? And let's move beyond just burnout.
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest challenges are really the mindset ones. At a deep level, most of us know what we want. So like what I tell my clients is most of us have two things. We have this kind of nagging dream, this nagging idea that's in our head. And then we have this list of reasons as to why we can't do it, as to why it's not practical, why it's not realistic, why it's not meant for us, why it won't work out. And so those are the two biggest things, is one, helping people connect back to what they want, because I say most people know deep down. Sometimes it's like deep down. Like we really have to dig, because we're so used to asking, okay, well, what's going to be impressive on this application? Or what does the med school admissions committee want from me? And our brain is just really focused on external, that we're not actually asking ourselves, but like, what do I want to do? What do I enjoy? And so that just kind of coming back to yourself, coming back and connecting to what you want. I don't know how many times I've gotten on an initial call with someone and asked them what they want, and they're like, oh, and they'll start giving me everything they don't want, which is like a start. But it's like just learning how to articulate and identify what you want is really important. And then learning how to work through all of the fear, all of the mindset, like all of the emotional pieces around why you feel like it's not right for you. And when I say emotional pieces, there is a lot that goes in with medicine specifically that's different than other career paths, because there's like a identity thing. There's like grief and loss of identity. There's this idea that I'm doing a disservice to society. So there's like a lot of deeper layers that I deal with my health professional clients, that like before I was working with like lawyers and corporate people, and that kind of stuff wasn't there. It was a little bit easier to kind of send them on.
So
their way.
let's talk about this identity thing. Identity is everything. Like, they say, in Atomic Habits with James Clear, he says it's really not your habits, it's your identity that really drives it, right? Go inside out versus outside in, right? We always think, oh, it's my environment. It's like what I do in the morning. It's like these habits. It's the routines I build, the rituals. But really, once you say, hey, look, this is who I am, then that everything sort of sprouts from that. So if a physician is a physician or a doctor or the other professions you mentioned, how do they navigate the fact that they're quote unquote giving it up, or what's the framework there?
Yeah. So I don't think we don't have to think about giving it up. Like, I just think of it as like diversifying your identity assets. Like just start putting more weight in other buckets. You already have plenty of other identities too. So just start paying more attention to those, or like putting more energy into some of those identities. And ideally they're identities that are not just based on your role to other people. Because I think especially with women, that's something we do, is like our identities are based on how we serve other people. And that's lovely. But I think we also need to find identities that are just based on us, who we are. Like, I'm an adventurer. I'm a Spanish student right now. I'm a rebel, like finding things that are really unique to you and starting to explore those more as well.
I love that. Guys, I would write that down. Diversify your identity assets. I think that's a cool buzzword. That's really cool. So what's sort of your mission now, and what's your goals, and where do you see yourself as you move forward?
Yeah, the way I see my mission, like I'm a very visual person, and it's like I just want to help people break out of the boxes and the cages that we've been put in by society that say like a successful life and career has to look a certain way. And so I'm just really interested in helping people identify what are the boxes they've made for themselves, and how can we just deconstruct those and break free of all of those narratives so that we can actually just live what's really true for us.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. Everyone's interested in this digital nomad bit. Can you help us understand, how many countries have you been to now?
I'm on country 49.
49. Wow. Give me your top five highlights. Which
Oh my God,
I
so
know
hard.
it's hard.
Taiwan, Morocco,
Taiwan, Morocco. Okay.
Mexico. Bolivia is like up there now. I just got
Oh,
here, but
wow.
I love it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I got for now. I got
Okay.
4.
Okay. Those are awesome. Yeah. And they're not the typical ones that everyone talks about. So that's great. You know,
Yeah, I
tell
like to
me,
keep it weird.
tell me, like, is there like, are you, is this doable? Like, can people start incorporating travel and adventure into their, even if they're working a 9 to 5 in a W-2? Is there a way to do this?
Yeah, I imagine like I'm literally part of a travel community full of people who are working W-2s and 9 to 5s. And
Yeah.
I've met people traveling who are like other types of health professionals, like speech language pathologists and
Mhm.
nurse practitioner, like people just doing telehealth. So even health professionals,
Yeah.
there's especially after COVID, like remote work and hybrid work is a lot more acceptable these days. So yeah, I think
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Virtual medicine, guys, is huge, which is a sort of the next version of, I guess, telemedicine. Uh, Next thing is
oh
locums is very powerful. Most of you guys have 8 to 12 weeks of vacation, which you guys, many of you don't use. Use it strategically, and you can get out here and do things. And the other thing is really just the most successful people in the world, what they do is they plan their vacations and their trips and their adventures first. Then the rest of their life sort of fits in with all the rest, right? So their passions or adventures or things that make them alive are prioritized first. And so that, I think it's a really cool tool, and we've been able to do that as well. And so it's awesome. So tell me about maybe your top 2 or 3 mentors, and perhaps a couple of books that you think would really help our audience.
yeah, and my mentors shift and change in so many different ways. And so I have this, I'm right at this intersection of what I call like I'm spiritually ambitious. So like I love all the spiritual stuff about like peace and contentment, but then I also love the ambitious stuff about like building a business and scaling. So I'll give you like a few mentors from both because I feel like
Sure.
they're different
Sure.
vibes. So spiritually speaking, I love Tara Brach and Eckhart Tolle. And The Power of Now is like what I read during 4th year of med school. And that was one thing that really set me on this trajectory. So that's from spiritual angle. And then from the ambitious angle, I like Tony Robbins was one of my first people. I know that's such a like classic answer, but I think
Yeah.
he just has this really great initial framework for helping you challenge and release all those beliefs that are keeping you stuck in those cages. So Awaken the Giant Within is like such a powerful read.
Yeah, I love that. Awesome. Well, guys, if you want to get a hold of Chelsea, and if you want to be in our ecosystem or community, or you want to work with her, there's going to be a opportunity here. So Chelsea, tell them how they can get a hold of you or just learn more about you and everything like that.
Yeah. So what I'd love is for you guys to come find me on the Life After Medicine podcast. So you can go to coachchelseamd.com/podcast and find me there, since you guys are already podcast listeners. If you're feeling particularly like unhappy in your career, disillusioned, feeling like you're not in quite the right fit, I have a free audio course within the podcast, but you can download that separately if you go to coachchelseamd.com/diagnose, and that'll help you diagnose your career unhappiness.
Awesome, guys. This was a really interesting conversation. I really loved sort of some of the brain tattoos you're putting on us. Call it diversifying your identity assets. It's really values misalignment, trying to figure that out. It's learning to sort of emotionally regulate your nervous system to sort of recover from this undiagnosed PTSD that sometimes we all go through. And it's really living that ideal and best life that's on your terms. So thank you, Chelsea. It's been a great episode.
Thanks so much.
Awesome. Take care, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Limitless MD. If you found value from this episode, I encourage you to share this episode with a friend and let me know by leaving a review. For more information, make sure you check out the links in the show notes below or simply visit vikramraya.com. Until next time, be phenomenal.